Welcome GRD132 Typography 1 to a quick little exercise where we're going to do some navigation buttons. Since we've been working with CSS and working with web design a little bit and our chapter talked about navigation, we're going to make some navigation buttons. We'll do some round cornered ones that go along the top and we'll just do kind of a menu going down. Now these aren't activated yet, meaning they're not links. You can't see a link finger right now. They just kind of visually they look like buttons, but they're not functioning right now. But we're just going to do that. We're going to design them to look like buttons. And notice that we're giving them a nice sans serif font so they look nice at small sizes. So that's what we're going to do. Then it'll be pretty quick to do. So I'm going to start this from scratch. So I'm going to go back and make a new repel. So I'll go to create and it's going to be HTML, CSS, JS. And you could just call it 14-Nav Buttons. And you can put your last name, first initial. And that's it. Now, since I'm opening up a new repel, I'll close my tab of the page that I had open there. And remember, when this opens up, we don't need script.js. So I'm going to delete that just to get it out of the way. And also in our body, we don't need the link to script.js and we don't need hello world. So I'll delete that as well. And I'll open this up in a new tab. It'll just be easier to preview that way. And then I'll move this over so we have more screen for our code. Now remember, you could always click on here to have more code that way, but if you're going back and forth between CSS and index, it's easier to keep this out. Depends how big a screen you have. And then also what I like to do, because we're talking about what's on different levels here, I like to put the children in. So everything, head and body, I like to highlight that and just hit tab and just move everything in. So I know that head and body are all children of the main HTML. And then this one, these 4 lines here, now if I just highlight them all and hit tab, now normally you can't do that because it'll replace your text with a tab, but with coding IDEs, it assumes you want to indent in. So I'm going to just hit tab. And probably goes a little too much, so I'll backspace so it goes back to that line. So everything's lined up nice. I like to do that from the beginning. You don't want to do that later after you have a lot of code. So we do have a link here to style.css already, so we're going to put our styles right in there. And if you want to change this Replit title just to say 14 Nav Buttons, that'll be fine. You could put your name on it. You do something like that. Remember, this doesn't have to be like a file name. You could have spaces in there. That's fine. And then in our body, what we're going to do is do it 2 ways. We're going to do buttons 2 ways. So I'm going to W3 Schools. This is always a great site to go to for any resources. And I'm going to CSS tutorial. And if I scroll down, there's a section on advanced. Here, CSS Advanced, and they have buttons. Anything you need to know about CSS buttons are here. Now they're showing using a button element. If you go in here, here's a class name that's styling the button. Border, color, padding, text align, text decoration, all kinds of things there. Now if you try yourself and you look at the code, you can see that they're actually using a button element. We're going to use it once with the button element, then we're going to use a list item. So I'll close this up. I'll keep this open in case we need to go back and look at anything. And you can see all these different properties here if you need to do round corners or anything like that. A lot of cool stuff here. They show you how to do all this kind of stuff. Even drop shadows if you need. I don't think I'm going to do a drop shadow, and even how to hover and even how to change the transition duration so that when you hover, it doesn't just change color, it kind of delays for a second or kind of transitions, which looks nice. We'll try to do that too. So we'll keep this open as a resource. So we'll go and make our buttons quick, and this will be pretty easy. I'm going to go into my body tag here and I'll hit return so that it keeps the indent. And I'm going to make 4 buttons that go along the top. And I can do that all at once. I'm just going to use a button element. So I'm going to type button and I'm going to type .btn because that's going to be the class name. So they'll all have a button class because I'll use that btn class to style it. Although you could style just the button element, I'm going to style that class in case you would have more than one. And then I'm going to do *4 and then hit tab. And it's even showing what it's going to look like. There it is. That's that Emmet shortcut that does that. And then I'll put button 1 in here. Now I could have even put text inside there when I did it, but I'll just copy this, paste it inside the button tags. And I know they say button 1, but I'll change that one to 2, this one to 3. So I got 4 buttons. And by default, what it looks like, I'll refresh this here. These are what the default button elements look like. And people use them on forms, but you can also use them for regular buttons. So they already do have a sans serif font on them, so we don't have to change that. But let's go and color them, make them bigger and nicer. So we do have this button class. We'll use that. So we'll go into style.css and we'll get rid of this wow thing. And we'll just do .btn. Remember, class name gets a dot. And I'll do a space, curly brace, hit return. And this is where we're going to put all our stuff in there. Now, we'll put a background color. So we'll type background. Now, one thing, when we type background, it doesn't do dash color. We have to put that in. And then a colon, space, if you want. And I'll just make it sea green. I'll start with that. And then I'll put a semicolon. And if you want to change the color at all, you could click on this thing. And I'll make it a little more aqua-ish and a little darker, a little more tealish, like that. I'll hit enter. So the background color is going to be sea green. It's using a hex color number, which is basically a hex conversion of RGB. So the first two numbers are the R, the second two are the G, the last two are the B, which is the blue. So the higher numbers are actually the green and the blue. Now let's just see what it looks like for now. And they're really small, and they have black type, and they have a border, and we'll get rid of some of that. We could even take away the border right now. You can do border, and when border comes up, you can click on it. And I think if you hit tab, it'll put your colon and semicolon, and I'll just put none right now. Now, other borders, we may have to put 3 things here, but we'll just put border none. And we'll put color white. That'll make the text color white. You could just type white and put a semicolon. And we could do font size to make the font size a little bigger. We'll see how that looks before we start putting padding on. So we'll do font dash size, and we'll use ems, which is kind of like relative. So 1 would be 100%. I'm going to do something like 1.3 em for now. And if we want rounded corners, we could do something called border radius, which we could still do even if you don't have a border. So border dash radius, and usually we put in pixels. So I'll try like 8 pix for now. And if you look at the samples over here, I think they use 8 pix to get a nice kind of round cornered look to them if you go through them. Yeah, this one's 8, so something like that. And all depends how big the button is. So let's see how this looks now. Looks a lot better, except we want more space in here. We want bigger buttons. Now, we're not going to just adjust the width. We can just put padding. If you put padding around the text, it'll make the button bigger. So we're going to do padding on the top and bottom and padding on the right and left. And the nice thing is you could put padding. Now, padding is inside the element, so it'll be inside the button. We could just do padding, and then if we put 2 values, the first one will be top and bottom, and the second one will be right and left. So I'll put like 12 pix on the top and bottom, and then a space, not a comma, and then maybe 24 px on the left and right. So this is top and bottom, this is left and right, and there it is. And they look pretty good. And we could even put more space between the buttons if we want. And one way we could do that, there's different ways we could do it. And one thing we could do is add margin. Margin would be outside the button, and we could do margin right. And just put space outside the margin on the right side. And I'll put 16 pix for now and see how that looks. And that spaces them out a little bit. And if you wanted them a little bit wider, you could put more padding on either side, but that looks pretty good. And we don't have any rollover kind of effect right now, but it's something called hover. If you go back here and you look for hover, it's pretty easy. It's just a colon hover, hoverable buttons, and you basically just use the class name colon hover, and then you just change one of the things it's going to change now, which is usually just the background color. So that's what we'll change for that. Now, one thing to point out, if you ever had this inside somewhere where you didn't want space on this side, and you needed to actually not have margin there, you could do something called Nth Child. You could go here and do .btn colon Nth Child. And there's Nth Child, and they have last child here. And I could use last child, or I could go Nth Child, and in parentheses, I could basically select the 4th child of whatever its parent is. So I'm going to select 4 here. And actually, just to show you, I'll select the first one, because you're not going to notice it if I take away the margin on the right side there. But if I wanted to change the margin, let's say on the first button, and put more. Now, I wouldn't want to do this, but if I wanted to make margin right, and instead of 16, I wanted to do it double, like 32. And that would be for Nth Child 1. That would mean the first child, and I could kind of target elements that way. It's putting more space there. So that way, if I ever needed to take off the space, so if they had space on the right side, but they were in some kind of box and I didn't want extra space there, I could target the 4th child or last child they were showing, I think when I started typing it, it was coming up with last child as well. Nth-last-child does that. But you can double check that. You could look up Nth Child in W3 schools. But I don't think I really need to do that. So I'll just put 0 here, and it's the 4th one. Now you're not going to see this, but I'll just put it there because that would be the purpose of doing it. I wouldn't show you this for any other reason other than if you had to take away the margin on the right side here for whatever reason. You had a background color, you had it centered, and it just didn't look right with that margin because it's off, because now it has stuff on that side. Now it has space on that side. Now I should refresh this so that goes back the way it was. And now let's do some hover, and we just target the class .btn :hover, and whatever we want to do to make it hover, we're going to change this to background color. And we could just click on this and make it maybe a lighter version and hit enter. And now I'll refresh this. Look how easy that is. Pretty cool. And you could make other things happen if you wanted the text to be dark. If you thought, oh, that's too light, the text should be dark. I mean, you could go back and make color black. If the light was too light and you needed to swap out the color, you could do that. I'm not saying it would look good like that, but you could do that. So you could refresh that, and that way it turns black. It might be easier to read like that. You don't want to be changing too much when just a hover state, but the hover state, again, is just to give the user the ability to realize that they're hovering over it and that it's active, to make sure everything's working, to give some feedback, really. Some interactive feedback is what that does. So that's one way to do that. You could do that if you want. Now let's make another list of buttons, and we're going to do it a little bit differently. Instead of using the button element, we're just going to use a unordered list. So we could go in here, and I'll just go after body. I'll put 2 spaces just to separate it a little, and I'll do UL, which is an unordered list. Now you could give a class name to the UL, or you could give it to the LI. So I could go UL and then LI dot whatever. I could call it button 2 or something, and then I could do multiply by 6 and hit tab, and it's given a class of button 2. Now I could have just left it without a class name and just targeted the LI. I could have done that, but if you have LIs all over your page, maybe you have different kind of lists and you don't want to target every LI. That makes it more specific. So I'm going to target button 2. Now I didn't put any of these things in here, so let me just copy these. I could have put them in as I did it. So actually, let me show you how to do that just to make it even quicker, even though I already did it. But if I can remember, I did UL forward arrow and then LI dot BTN2, and then I think I use curly braces, and I'll just put in button 1 inside there. Now they'll all be button 1, and then I'll do multiply by 6. Let's see if this works. Look at that. And I just have to change these. So that was an easy way to do all that HTML. And now we can target a class of BTN2, and let's see what it looks like right now. Looks like a bulleted list, which is an unordered list. So let's change that a little bit, and let's go into our style. And I'm going to copy all these because we're probably going to use a lot of them, so let's copy that. And it's the button 2 class, so I'll change that to 2. And maybe I'll make it like a purple color. I think that's what I did on the other one. I'll go over here and make a nice purple, get a little more red in it. Oh yeah, that's nice. Border, maybe I'll put a white border on it. Border, and actually if you do a border, I'll start typing border, and I'll click here. Now nothing's coming up now, but if we do put a border, you have to put 3 values in. We're going to put 1 px and then a space, and then that's the thickness, and then we're going to put the style, which is just going to be solid, and then we're going to put the color, which we'll put white. And we have our text color white, font size 1.3, border radius we're going to take out. We won't make these round corner. And I don't know about padding yet. We'll see how it comes out. Margin right, I'm going to take out margin right. We'll see what this looks like so far. And they go across the page because they're block elements, so we're going to have to adjust the width on these. Otherwise, they go all the way across the page. Now you could put a percent, you could put a width. I'll just put a width of these, and I'll put width, and I'm not sure. I'll just start off with like 140 px, see how that looks. And that's fine. You can make them shorter. Now you could change the font here. Now I would want a sans serif font. Now we didn't have to specify for the other button, but in here we'd want to put font family and then put like a first choice, a second choice. We could just put sans serif and it'll use the browser's default sans serif. We could just do that and see what that looks like. And there it is, it finally came up, and that looks fine for buttons. That looks okay. And then we could also do a hover. Now I'll just copy this hover. And I'm not going to make the color black like I did for that one. And I'm going to go to here, and I'm going to take the eyedropper, and if I can get over that purple, I'll select that, and then I'll just make a little bit of a lighter purple, just a little bit. I'll hit enter, see how that looks. And I'm also going to put a, oh, we do have a white border here, so let's see what this looks like. It's a little slow to refresh. My hover's not working. Oh, I did something wrong here. This should be button 2, hover. We don't want to change that one. We could do that. So that looks, let me refresh it first. Alright, so that's the way it was, and that looks like that. And that's nice. That looks pretty good. So that's all we're going to do. That's it. That's our little exercise, just a little kind of experiment with using some styles on some navigation and kind of making a nice color scheme here. We didn't do anything with the background, but 2 ways. One is with a button element. One is with a list, so that you could use list elements. They have class names, and use all those kind of declarations and styles to make it look nice. You could also have things that you could hover over here and another drop-down menu comes out. It might be invisible to start, then it'll be visible, but that requires a lot more coding. But for now, this is just our little example of doing that with CSS in Replit. So when you're done, you can just either copy this, or you can copy this and just go back to coursework and go down to Unit 10, and this is Exercise 14, CSS Navigation Buttons. Just go in there, click on the assignment, click on Add Comment, click on the link, paste your link from Replit, and then change current window to new window so it opens up in a new window, and hit Save, and that's it. That's your hands-on assignment using buttons.